Hi everyone, so today we're going to learn how to make our cowl. It is knit flat using both a combination of stockinette stitch and garter stitch to create a textural stripy pattern. You can kind of knit it however you want, but I will write the items that you need for the cowl as well as the pattern instructions in the description box below so that you can follow along. This video will teach you how to cast on, how to knit, how to do a garter stitch, and how to purl. The second video will teach you how to bind off and seam it up like that, and then weave in your ends so that you're done and you can wear your cowl. I'll show you what it looks like. I like this cowl because you can hide from people when you don't want to see them. I'd totally walk around like that, doesn't bother me. So for this cowl, I had my hank of Cascade Eco Wool. It's a lot of wool, which is why I recommend it. If you will have it wound or you wind it yourself evenly so that you have two balls that weigh about the same, I think about 125 grams each, you will have enough to make this cowl out of half and then enough to make the toque that we're going to make in the next tutorial. So it's kind of cool. Each one will cost you about 10 bucks, which is awesome. So I hope that you stick around and I will show you how to get going on this bad boy, and then the next video we will learn how to finish it up. So yeah, stick around, we'll have fun. So to start off, I have half of my Cascade Eco Wool wound up. Your pull ball or a cake, whatever you want to call it. I have my number 10 needles. You can use straight, you can use circular, it's up to you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. We're going to start off by using a long tail cast on or a Y cast on. I've got my working yarn on my right and I've got my end on my left. It's how you want to set up your cast on. We're going to take the yarn and place the needle underneath. You can make a slip stitch if you feel more comfortable. I just like to pinch the yarn onto my needle. With that, I'm going to take my thumb and my pointer finger, I'm going to place them under the yarn like so, and then I'm going to pull the yarn under. So I have my end on my thumb and my working end on my index finger. Going to take my ring finger and my pinky finger and I'm going to pinch those ends so that I get a really tight cast on setup. I've got them pinched, it makes a Y cast on. I'm going to start my cast on by going underneath the loop that is created by the end. I'm going to go under that, and then I'm going to go over to where the yarn is over top of my index finger, and I'm just going to pull that through. Just scoop it up and through and let go. And I have a stitch. So again, we have the yarn over top of our thumb. We're going to go underneath it. We're going to take the working yarn, pull it through, and pull. By having the working yarn over your pointer finger, you're going to use the working yarn to create your loops. You obviously have more working yarn than you do on your end, so it won't eat up all the yarn on your end. You're going to continue picking up from the thumb, moving over to the pointer finger, scooping, pulling through, and pulling not too tight, just tight enough to keep it on the needle. You don't want to have to be working too hard when you knit your next row. So you want to continue casting on in that manner until you get 100 stitches. So now that I have my 100 stitches on my needle, all cast on in a nice little row, I'm going to turn my work. So now we're going to do a knit stitch. I'm right-handed, so I usually keep my work on my left which is my non-working hand, I guess, kind of, my feeding hand. Okay, as you can see, I've already knit a couple stitches because, honestly, it's kind of hard to remember how you knit when you're trying to tell other people how to knit. So you're going to take your working yarn, you're going to have your yarn to the back. You're going to go into the first stitch on your needle. Obviously, it's not my first stitch, but it will be your first stitch. You're going to go into that stitch, just like that, in through the front door. You can see the loop. You're going to make an X with your needles, pull your working yarn around clockwise, and pull through. So again, in through that front stitch, like so, making an X, wrap your working yarn around clockwise, and back through. You want to keep your work decently tight, but not too tight. The nice thing about the bulky wool is that it kind of keeps you from knitting too tight, from getting your tension too tight. So again, in through that front stitch, like so, making an X, wrapping your working yarn around clockwise, and back through. I'll knit a couple more for you. Kind of hard to do through a viewfinder, but I'm making it work. And that should be what your first row of knit stitches look like. So this is your first row of knitting. If you're using a knit counter, it will be row 1, the right side of your knitting. Right side versus wrong side. This will be the side that will face out to the world. So the side you want to be the prettiest. We're going to do 10 rows of knit stitches. So to knit our second row of garter stitch, we're going to flip our work again with our yarn in the back, just like the first row. And we're going to repeat that first row all over again. Again through the front, out through the back, in through the front, and just keep knitting those knit stitches that I taught you for 10 rows. You will have a row of purl bumps on the right side of your work. You want 5 of these ridges. That will equal 10 garter stitch rows. After you've completed your 10 garter stitch rows, or 5 purl ridges, we'll come back and we will learn the purl stitch so you can do the stocking knit portion of your cowl. So once I knit my 11th row of knit stitches, I turned my work and keeping my working yarn to the back of the work, I started to work my purl rows. It just makes it easier for me to show you how to knit a purl row without my needle flopping around. So to knit a purl stitch, you're going to have your working yarn at the front. You're going to take your right-handed needle and go into the back of the stitch on your left needle. And instead of going in through the front, like you did for a knit stitch, you're going to go into the back for a purl stitch. Taking your working yarn, you're going to move it around the front of the needle, counterclockwise, and pull it through. Again, you're going to put your needle in through the back of the stitch, making that X again, wrapping your yarn around the front, counterclockwise, and pulling through. You want to do that all the way to the end of your row. If I turn my work around, you can see how working that purl row has started creating a stockinette stitch, which will make that knitwear that you probably think of when you think of knitting with those little arrows. And that's what you'll get from repeating a knit stitch on the front and a purl stitch on the back. So continue on knitting your cowl. So I'll see you for the finishing video when we've gotten to the end of our cowls. We can bind them off and seam them up so that they're ready to wear.